Hi guys, this is Creative Cuts, a channel where I build, paint and create things. This video will be a little different to my usual miniature builds, a diary piece if you will. I've recently moved house and a major upside was that the house came with a shed type space at the back of the garden. And so the plan was made to turn this space into a multifunctional workshop. Previously it had a couple of rusty lawnmowers, lots of old building equipment, some old golf clubs, you get the idea. So I cleared it out, and under the layers of dust and random stuff I found a nice workbench and what looked like a decent little vise. It also had electrics and lighting, which all seemed to work well. The whole place was covered in cobwebs and clearing it out definitely took some effort. Obviously I've placed a few guardians in the window to ward off any wrongdoers. I wanted this space to work for painting miniatures, building dioramas, woodwork, painting on canvases, and somewhere to store all my materials, as well as filming all my YouTube stuff. A big ask for a relatively small space. I knew I would have to be clever with my organisation and make everything as modular as possible. There was even some space between the rafters that I think I could utilise for extra storage. I did have to make good some of the pointing on the brickwork, as this had crumbled in places, and although this was hard dirty work at the time, a little effort will help this wall stand for years to come. My first task was to build a small workbench on wheels that I could move around as needed. I picked up some wood from the local builder's merchant, worked out a basic design and cut things to size as needed. For my dimensions I worked backwards from the size of the sheet of the MDF and decided on an overall size that would suit my needs. I built a subframe to act as a main support structure for this table. I lined this up and clamped the wood in place and then drilled, countersunk and screwed the wood together. Onto this subframe I then screwed the legs on, taking care to keep everything square and straight. I flipped the whole thing over and repeated the same process. A simple, yet very sturdy frame for a workbench. Onto this frame I simply attached the MDF sheet with some screws. I then flipped it again and fixed on some little casters with a brake system. I wanted the workbench to move freely so I could push it out the way when I needed more space and lock it in place when I needed a solid workbench. I factored in the height of these when I calculated the overall height I wanted for my table. There you go, a simple workbench that will suit my needs perfectly. I then had a brainwave, and I immediately cursed myself for not thinking more ambitiously to begin with. But why not really utilise this idea of saving space? So I decided to add some drawers. If this was all planned out from the start, I could have easily designed it and made it differently to make life easier, but no. For some reason I decided after building the bench to reverse engineer some old IKEA drawers into this bench. With some quick maths and a lot of hope, I calculated the amount of negative space I would need to make the drawers work as designed. I filled in the gaps, and with a lot of tweaks here and there, I managed to get it all to fit together. I had two cabinets I could steal parts from, and stupidly assumed that whilst one was a 5-drawer and one was a 2-drawer unit, that they would be the same size. Apparently not, so I only had 5 usable drawers. But I adapted this void on the fly into a quick stash shelf for quick access to screw boxes. The drawers worked really nicely. Job done. And whilst I was building this workbench, my mind started to wonder about the next steps. Storage. Lots of storage. And as if by magic, some racking appeared standing proud and ready to be filled with goodies. I picked up this corner racking online for cheap and put this together in a couple of hours. And once again, my mind began to wonder, why just stop at drawers for my workbench? So I added a couple of battens to hang my clamps on, and a little place for my combination square, tools I use regularly for woodworking, and it just makes life easier to have them within reach at all times. I also filled the space behind the drawers with some shelves from offcuts. I'll make a little retaining border to keep the stuff on the shelves, but that's for a later date. A couple of dowels to hold my rolls of tape, and I also ordered metal measuring tape, which I stuck onto the bench. Feels a bit like a Swiss Army bench now. Nice. I began to move my stuff into the space and ended up building a few more little mini workbenches. One for my miter saw with the bed of the saw the same height as my workbench. I followed the same principle as before and built in a little shelf underneath for my jigsaw and sanders. Everything on casters so I can push it around as needed and lock it in place when I need stability. Because I like my workspace to be clean, I keep a few rolls of kitchen roll in store and just wedged a dowel cut to size to hold a roll in place. Slowly but surely I transferred over all my materials from my previous workspace and roughly put things in a vague order. Now this setup will change many times as I figure out my workflow in this new space, but for now this will do. I have space for my models and builds, my 40k armies, which I plan to make some display cabinets for. Stay tuned for that in an upcoming video. Various boxes of bottle caps and plumbing pipe and other random stuff that I think looks interesting. It all goes in one of various boxes to be used at a later date. Some say hoarder, some say future projects. My various modelling materials, plaster, flocks and static grasses, and my airbrush setup. All my brushes and palette knives and loads of miniature bits all grouped by theme. I also included a little painting station with some architectural lights with some diffusers stretched over them to give a softer light. I also upgraded my original workbench with some pegboard to house all of my hand tools. A simple yet effective way to give everything a place. A little bit of guttering taped onto the leg of the bench acts as a nice little holster for my glue gun. I also have a small organiser unit with tons of drawers, perfect for lots of little bits. I also picked up an industrial hoover, which I can also use for dust distraction by hooking it up to my power tools. I know it's a bit of a risk keeping all my hobby stuff in a space where I also plan to do woodworking, but that's on me to keep things tidy. Because I also want this space to be somewhere I can film my YouTube videos, I've also set up a cloth backdrop between the rafters. A simple yet effective addition to my workspace. It always used to be so much hassle to set everything up and put it all away again, and now I can just roll it up and move my workbench around as needed. And suddenly I looked around and before me stood something that resembles a studio. Sure, there's still lots to do, but from an empty room to this, well, that makes me smile. I know this is very different to one of my usual build videos, but now you guys get to see the space that I'm putting together, and you can see that there will be lots of space to build new projects, so don't worry, lots of builds coming soon. And to get to this point hasn't been the most straightforward, logical journey, but therein lies the fun, the discovery, and I look forward to working in this space and fine-tuning it to best suit my workflow. Thank you for staying with me this far, and if you want to see what I build in the future, you can subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest videos. Give the video a like to let YouTube know you appreciate this kind of video, and I'd love to hear you guys' feedback. I've done things that work for me in my given situation. Everybody sets up their space differently, But I'm happy to share a glimpse into my workspace, and maybe it's even given you a few ideas that you can bring into your own. Remember, everything comes from imagination. I'll see you in the next one.